Welcome to start off with, dude. I've been on your back for a few years now to try and get you out here, and I'm super stoked that we finally made it happen.
Me too, me too. Yeah.
Um,
Thanks
I,
for inviting me.
no, the honor is all mine, as I've made it amply clear on the record. I'm a bit of a fanboy. Been following your work for over a decade now, and I often start off with my first memory of the guest that I carry with me. Some of my guests I've never actually met 3D, which is weird because in some cases we actually have like really deep, meaningful relationships over the years. We've grown, managed to grow those into something meaningful. With you, I have had the privilege to actually meet you in person, which is pretty awesome. Mm. But that being said, my first memory of you was way back in the day, and I was shuttling between Mannheim and Harrogate, a tiny little town in North Yorkshire. And I remember on one of the flights back, I picked up an edition of Songlines, a print edition. Does the print edition still exist, by the way?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, lots have changed since then.
I know, right? Well, I hope they still exist because print is such an underrated media, I find. And I remember that edition came with a CD, man, like a legit CD with some really good music on it. And one of the tracks was from you, albeit with a Circle of Sound, your band with our common friend Bernie, Bernhard Chimpelsberger, who's also been on the podcast, by the way. Shout out. And I remember listening to that track and my world spinning. I probably make that sound a little dramatic, but that was the response. I intimately remember it was a very visceral response to that record because at the time, especially, things have changed quite a bit over the years, and that's something we can talk about down the line. But at the time, man, nobody was, at least not in my visible periphery, was doing what you folks were. I remember feeling so many influences coming at me. I would hear all these European influences, which I'd always longed to kind of hear in the context of what you do in your individual voice. And then I heard the sound of Bengal in your playing. I don't know, maybe this is me projecting, but when I hear you play, I hear so much Bengal. It's not just the gharana of the entire South Asian spectrum, but I'm getting my hair standing out on edge when you see that. It's got such a quintessential Bengali sound to it, which for me personally, by the way, isn't the most is not a less complex ecosystem to navigate in, because my relationship with the ancestral land is a very complex one. Not all of it is has been a pleasant journey. But yours is what embodies the most heart-centered, meaningful part to it. And that's when I started stalking you. And 15 years of stalking later, we're here. Although you've been kind enough to have me over at your place for dinner and whatnot. Amazing grub, by the way. Mad love at you folks. But also your work is something I've been following closely. The diversity and depth of which is quite stunning. And you know this. I know you know this. The way you carry it is, the grace with which you carry it is also something I find inspiring, because it's one thing to build a body of work that aims for that kind of quality, for that kind of bridging between worlds. So many people use that term, but actually pulling it off is not something everyone manages to without something too judgy. So I found myself always wondering, being someone who's also been on the streets of this city, Calcutta, and London, by the way, which was my first hometown, wondering Where did this guy start? Where did it begin? Because what we hear now is clearly the result of a lot of work, not even half of which makes it to the social media or the press releases. So the behind the scenes of it all is something I'm so curious about. How much of this can we dive into, Shomik?
Well, thank you so much. Really, it means a lot, and I love your work as well, and your aesthetic, and your
Thank you.
playing, and your voice, and
You're very kind.
um, all the wonderful sounds that you make. And I could say the same about the all the time that is unseen and invisible to everybody else,
Thank you.
and becomes like sort of part of your marrows and your cellular structure, and you don't really question it. It's just it is you.
Mm,
So yeah, I think yeah we both know what that's like to have sort of invested now. We're probably the same age, right?
round about, yeah. You're a little younger, I think. You're
Uh,
84, right? I'm 79.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, so like more than half your life really
Mm-hmm.
doing this. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I I think I was just really lucky because because I found my guru and it
Mm,
happened very organically. And the other part of sort of my sound aesthetic world training happened by just being a sort of brown person in the UK at a
mm-hmm.
specific time.
Mm,
And you know what that's like. And I
100%.
think those two things, it was a combination of the stability of my guru who lived in Kolkata, my short visits to see him, but regular, and the purity of the music that existed in his space, in his home, in the way he taught, and the way he distilled. He knew he didn't have that much time left, and so he was distilling exactly what he needed to pass on. He knew not everything can be passed on to a teenager, in the years that he had left, but he knew how to
Wow.
do it. And that's not just for me, but like he is it's like it's a football team of players that he trained,
Mm,
and they all had that same kind of very mm, surgical training, and we can talk about that.
mm-hmm.
But there was that, and then there was the pure confusion of being in the UK, having traveled here as a kid with my family because my dad migrated with his job, and then basically we all left Mumbai
Mm-hmm.
and came and settled in London, um, and I think that journey of assimilating, not assimilating, trying to not not doing it so successfully has created this yo-yo to my life, which only after a long time I realized was a privilege and and the sort of the lack of stability um, between not really feeling where home is. And I know a lot of
Mm,
people talk about this, but I still, I'm beginning to appreciate that I don't need to be someone who says my home is here or there.
mm-hmm.
I can have the privilege of finding home wherever I am with people who are also in love with music, or people that I'm working with, or just with my instrument, or in a residency, or somewhere in India, or somewhere else in the world, or in London. And actually, those are all spaces that we can call home. There isn't my home and your home. Um, and that I think is something still new and is settling in maybe um, in the recent sort of this year almost,
Really.
that sense of um, being okay with that, um, especially in a world where um, you know like what is my home and what is your home,
Mm,
and um, is something that is just becoming more and more polarized.
Mm-hmm.
There is some comfort in settling back into the ambiguity of that space.
Very well said. So much to unpack there. Let me see where I can start. My first um, point of curiosity would be, as children, we don't think about someone being different from us on the basis of the food they eat or the tone of their skin necessarily, or the manner in which the words coming out of their mouth sound. But that changes somewhere along the line. I have some distinct memories of when that became a thing. Do you have any? Is there a specific point of time when you remember thinking, "Oh, hang on, we are quote unquote supposed to be different here, and that's something to navigate"?
Um, yeah, I guess there were the usual things of like sort of microaggressions and things like
Mm-hmm.
that that a lot of us have faced. I think the memory that sticks with me the longest, oh, it still does now, so clearly must be a strong one,
Mm-hmm.
um, was more to do with um, like the sort of tricky space where, well, I'll tell you the story.
Go for it.
Um, I was in the library. Uh, a lot of us, yeah, there was a good place to study basically, and I remember I was there quite late, and then as I was leaving, another group of sort of South Asian kids. I think they were born and brought up in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they sort of they were walking past and they were like, "Hey, what's up? What's up?" And I had my headphones on, so I didn't hear them. So they kind of snatched the headphone and they were like, "Oh, what's he listening to? What's he listening to?" And so I knew them, so they were just joking around. And so they put it on and they were like, and they were dressed up to go to a club. They were going out for the evening.
Gotcha. London night at.
Like yeah, like college friends.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they were like, "Oh, what's this bhajan you're listening to?"
What were you listening to?
I was listening to it was Rajan Sarjan Mishra ji.
Beautiful.
I think it was a Jai Jawanti, and I remember there were a couple of CDs at that time, and MP3 sort of ripping had just come into play,
Mm-hmm.
so I was all into that. The early stages of sampling when you're pirating
Yep.
uh, illegally. I shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
say this, but and then.
I highly doubt
And then
anyone gives
I was
a.
just listening on the, I think we had those, what are they called? Not iPod.
AirPods, yeah.
Yeah, the old iPod,
Uh-huh.
you could store like so much music um, and so that's what I was listening to. And they had a good old laugh at like, this brown kid who was listening to Bhajans coming out of the library while they were all um, going out for a night out with their leather
Mm.
jackets and stuff. And and it was interesting because it was the first time I'd felt othered by people who were the same color as me,
Mm-hmm.
and and it then many years later learned about sort of yeah um, like what that actually is, and the trauma that they faced and their parents faced
Mm.
becomes their vocabulary and the way that they see people, they see themselves as less brown, um, and they see brown people as more maybe or other. Um, and it
Interesting.
was interesting that uh, that music was sort of what triggered it, because it was probably something, I can imagine their grandparents would play in the temple, or like, sunrise radio or something in the
Mm.
mornings. And so they had that association of like old India, like, old people, traditional, and they're not wrong. And I think, yeah, like then you start thinking about this, Indian classical music that we practice today. it is simultaneously part of this like very old world, but it's also alive with us and the people you're listening to and talking to
Mm.
right now. Although those are very small circles, uh, which is kind of um, a surreal thing to be stretched across time like that through music. And music does that. It can both make you feel like you're 100 years before and today.
Mm.
And sometimes, if it's the right kind of music, you feel like you're ahead in time or something. Um,
So true.
but yeah, that's my anecdote.
S- That's so interesting, man. Interesting without getting to um, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Without getting to into the nitty gritties of it, I would think that's something I share in common with you. That being othered is something I also started facing for the first time in my life from a demographic of people who haven't traditionally been known as the ones who other. So
Mm,
getting othered goes so much beyond surface level definitions or attributes like skin tone. It's so much more to do with the headspace. My experience of being othered was actually in Kolkata.
mm,
Standing in the middle of a Kolkata classroom, my dad was intent on sending me to an Indian school, and it was as Indian as it gets, as Bengali as it gets. And like the entire class and the teaching just laughing their butts off at my accent.
mm,
I don't know what hit me. And I was like fresh off the boat from Leytonstone, had no clue what was going on. Um, the funny thing is, since I grew up listening to accents from my parents, which were around me, I never thought of us being quote unquote different. So I was completely familiar to a certain extent. But for them,
mm,
and mind you, this is pre internet India, yeah, this is a whole different universe altogether. Um, and I did have a very quote unquote British accent at the time. I remember thinking, what's going on? What exactly is it that I did wrong here? And so it began my first query with, okay, what exactly is the difference here? And, where does this lead to? Where do we begin? And that's been pretty much a lifelong journey. But music, man, and you nailed it with that. At the risk of oversimplifying, it's just such a different lens to have on the world. If that's your primary compass, it comes with a remarkable gift and curse, because you're constantly in connection with the inherent commonalities between humans. Sound is just nothing unites the way sound does, I feel. But then again, navigating life as a professional musician or artist, quote unquote, is a head-on collision with everything that is an antithesis to that theory.
mm.
Um, his, but before we go there, tell me a little more about your relationship with the sarod. That is an interesting choice of instruments. Like even for someone who would say grow up only in one social environment, it's not the most common instrument to choose in the first place. How did that happen?
Mm. Um, yeah, this one is a another story,
Mm-hmm.
which um, so I was 11 when my family moved, um, migrated from India to the UK,
Mm-hmm.
and among all the packing boxes um, that arrived, like you know, the shipping cardboard boxes, there, well, I mean, it was a day like this. It was raining, and my younger brother and I were sort of indoors. We were like, "What do we do?" So we were playing like um, indoor cricket across the living room
Nice.
in this tiny little corridor of a space among lots of cardboard boxes. And remember hitting the ball into one of them, and it sort of went twang,
Huh.
and so I opened it up, thinking I'd sort of broken my mum's china or something, and it was this moth-eaten cloth cover with some holes in it and something shiny and stringy, like shining through it.
No
So I took it
way.
out and found there was this sort of instrument there, and one of the strings had torn because of the ball hitting
Oh
it.
man, I'm getting
And
major
then,
goosebumps pimples listening to this. Wow.
and then I thought I'd broken it, but then my dad came back home from work and he sort of restrung it and tuned it and played it for the first time. And I mean, I might have heard it before here or there, but that's really when I heard it for the first time. And it turned out that that instrument was his mother's, and she used to play,
Huh.
and he had learned some, and so he taught me my first lesson basically that day, um, which was this old composition in Rag Kafi, and um,
Wow.
and and then yeah, I never played indoor cricket again.
Clearly. Wow, man, what a story. So that cricket ball, or I'm guessing tennis ball or something, literally led you to your destiny. For as
Yeah, um,
maybe you should be
yeah.
playing indoor cricket more often.
Find find all kinds of other things. But yeah, that was the start of it. And then because of that history of music in the family, my dad said, okay, after a while, you need to go and learn from someone. Um, and so he took me to see Guruji in Kolkata one December. And I remember sort of
Buddhadev Bhattacharya? No.
Buddha Das Gupta, yes.
Das Gupta, my bad. My bad. I apologize.
No, no. And and I was sort of sitting in the living room, and he was just finishing a concert. And I remember the gates opening, the car driving in, and these footsteps sort of, you know, coming closer towards the doorstep. And then the curtain sort of brushed past, and there was this giant of a man with very warm eyes, and then he sat down and he said, play me something." And then he said, okay. Um, he remembered my grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and was and he was sad that she was no more. And then he said, okay, tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock, be here.
6 o'clock.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Whoa.
yeah. Lessons were early.
Apparently. Wow. So let me get this straight. Your grandma was a professional musician, and the next generation went into a different stream,
Yeah,
or?
I mean, again, like I think about that word professional a lot because what did that
Mm.
really?
Mm-hmm.
She played on radio apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't have those recordings, but that must mean she was good. Um, and but she didn't have a career. There weren't like festivals chasing her or, posters she had to make for social media and stuff. So like what did it mean to be like a good player? But um yeah, so that line from between like sort of serious about music and like
Mm-hmm.
professional musician,
Fantastic question.
I don't know where that was before. Um and uh But yeah, well, my guru was an engineer actually, for many years. He was an engineer till the age of 40, at which uh, around 40 he quit his job and became a full-time musician. He was already playing concerts and stuff, but living this sort of dual life.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point he was like, Do this full time." Um, and yeah, that was the sort of connection to him and to like this journey that started for me.
I thought I came from a family of doctors, which I do, up until I found out relatively recently that apparently on my mom's side, there was an uncle who was a quote unquote professional musician, uh, music director, as they call it here, who apparently was
Yeah.
even friends with R.D. Burman and the likes, and worked with him. And my grandfather, my father's dad, who passed quite early actually, was a sitar player, apparently quite serious as well. So serious that he gave up the vocation, even though he had a day job, because someone asked him to play a rag which was not appropriate to the time of the day. And he was so mad that he said, I'm never playing sitar again. So obviously quite some heavy-duty degree of passion involved there. Unfortunately, there are no archives whatsoever of their works, and all of it, as you can imagine, is very vague. But just goes to show that I think that's a history a lot of South Asian folks do kind of share, that like there's a generation in between which had a very specific brand of separation from what their family might have actually been more involved in. In my case, I know my parents, well, my dad was definitely born to be a doctor. It was his passion. But, you know, the entire, most of the family didn't become doctors because it's like they went to a career counseling session at the end of high school and they're like, okay, what's the profession most suited to me? It was just survival, you know, and survival, the highest quality of survival they could make a call on. It doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion. But do you remember when you knew that this was it? Like, this is what I want to spend most of my life doing?
I don't think I've ever asked myself that question. Yeah, and I don't know, who knows? Of course, there were people around me who were sort of talking about that kind of thing and asking me if that was what I wanted to do, and I had other interests as well, and but what I did know was that there was something that happened when I was in the music space, whether I was playing or later on composing or sort of then doing both, or that in that space there was what people talk about, I think, as flow, where time flies
Flow
and you're
state,
not
yeah.
aware of it, and yeah, and you're not really, you're with your breath in some way, and that's it. Like there is you're navigating with something else, and that doesn't happen all the time, of course, but more often than not, it does happen. And it's beautiful to also find, even till like even today, I was practicing and I just tried something different, and find new ways of being in that zone again. Um, that that are so simple, that don't require like anything really, like just simple ways in which you can find a new door to enter that space.
Beautiful.
Um, yeah, and so I mean, what about you? Like, did you know that you wanted to do this early on?
I did, because at the time I was a disaster at everything else. My teenage years were a very dark phase in my life, and at this point I talk about it comfortably. It's been, what, 30 years. So at the time I was completely lost. School was a disaster, which made no sense because in London, funnily enough, they'd put me 3 classes above because I was apparently one of those quote unquote gifted children. Or
Mm.
2 classes. I think they wanted to put me 3 classes above, but the kids were too big for me. So
Uh-huh.
they settled on 2. And then the minute I landed in Kolkata, I got demoted. School was a disaster from the onset, and there was a certain degree
Oh
of
God.
stubbornness involved in my family. No, he's got to learn the ways of the world, and he's got to settle in. So it was a very reverse, like in a very classic sense of the word. So by the time I was 15, I had 2 suicide attempts behind me. I'm sorry if that gets dark, but I've also gone on the record, and this, my last EP was about this. And life was, nothing was working except music. And that's the one thing my parents really, I think they sensed that, okay, this might be the light at the end of the tunnel. So they helped me invest. At the time, you couldn't buy instruments very easily. And my dad had a piano over from London when we moved. Um, it was literally the only thing I apparently was not a disaster at, because this was a very, very different India, mind you. This was late 80s, early 90s, where so much of the topics which thankfully are being talked about today, child psychology, mental health generally, were absolutely, it wasn't on anyone's radar whatsoever. So at 14, I saw Steven Tyler slide down a pole on a Grammy Award show where he was performing. I said, hey, I want to do that. And needless to say, the kind of music I make has absolutely nothing to do with what Aerosmith does. But that was kind of like the catalyst, the whole thing. That, I want to, I think this is what I want to do for a living. Not sliding down poles, but playing music. Like, I'm not really sure what it is that made me connect. I think it was just the idea of the stage for some reason seemed like a safe space for me to be in. I think that air of untouchability that apparently rock stars came with was something I thought might be something that might keep me safe. Ironic, because the kind of circles I move in today are a very, very different one. I mean, needless to say, I'm not a rock star, or I don't even play rock music in the quintessential sense of the word. But then I started performing quite a lot at school, and that hit off pretty well. Like, I changed schools, and the second school I went to, they gave me a lot of leeway, really encouraged me. They had a music department, playing a lot of school festivals, and that one thing just led to another. But it wasn't the easiest road, not to go off on, but I had to, when I moved to Germany, I had to finish school again. I had to figure out a way to kind of get my quote-unquote academic life back on track, which is a thing, you have to have some kind of an academic track if you come from a family like mine. So I kind of finished school through a music program in Germany, and then went on to pursue my professional vocation / academic, whatever it is that I do now. But at 14, I knew that this is what I want to do. At first, it was just ridiculed because not a lot of people around me were choosing that as a profession in my immediate environment. But it was honestly it was a lifeline. There was just really nothing else I seemed to be remotely good at. And in hindsight, it's not something I necessarily recommend. I don't think taking this up as a profession, as a lifeline, is the best reason to do it, but it was the way it was in my case. I also agree with this terminology of a professional musician or a professional artist, and how vague a concept it is in this day and age, which gives me a segue to ask you your next interviewer question. You have a very vast palette of artistic skills. That's very evident to note, even though you've done a brilliant job of establishing your profile, doing what you do as like a definitive global sarod player. I remember, especially towards the early years, observing you, like you paint, and your work is actually pretty darn good. From what I remember, it's not just some hobby stuff. I mean, you could totally do exhibitions if you haven't already. You got some serious badass cinematographer skills. You really understand visuals. You understand production ethic. In fact, in my books, you're a pioneer in certain production ethics, like leveling up in the genre of music that kind of that space you occupied. Would you say this interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary lens plays a role in your actual musical voice? Do these skills transfer, spill over to each other?
Well, firstly, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky to have had people around me who are like kind of open to sharing their disciplines and their journeys and aesthetics. And a lot of it, I think, is also came down to my mum, who is a filmmaker, is a writer, is a singer. a producer, um, and many other things. Um, but and equally, my dad is a multi-instrumentalist. He paints incredibly well, um, and we grew up with this thing of like, well, yeah, you might dabble in this and that. Not even dabble, be you might really enjoy those. Those hobbies are legitimate ways to spend your time, um, but it doesn't need to be your career, or it doesn't need to be your like the main thing,
Mm.
or even be visible to like people around you. And so, and that I saw with not just my parents, but like the circle around them.
Beautiful.
Um, and they became sort of ways in which, um, I I could enjoy that again, that space, that sense of flow. You could find it in, writing poetry, or
Mm.
um, making a small painting or something, or just spending some time with still life, or there was that same feeling that you could reach after, half an hour of immersive practice or composition. And there was a sort of vague observation, not even an understanding, like an observation that these things lead to the same place, and that place is somewhere,
Wow, that's powerful.
somewhere. Um, yeah, don't know if you agree. Like, there's,
Completely. I just yeah, that's a very powerful conclusion to come to. Like all of these paths, they kind of lead to the same place.
mm,
So when you work on a piece, and at this point, the kind of work you're putting out there, they're not just music concerts. They're like 360-degree art installations in a way. I remember the last one I had a chance to visit in Kolkata here. How are you approaching it? What's your primary compass? Is it the music, or is it the vision? Is it the statement you want to make? Is it more of
uh,
a
yeah, I think it's, uh, I don't know which one's leading at any one point in time.
interesting?
Um, there's often a seed of an idea, um, which sometimes isn't one thing, it can be many things. At that point in time, I'd come up with this phrase. No, I'd rather the phrase had arrived, which is actually how it happened. While I was at Heathrow traveling to Chicago in October last year, this phrase arrived, and I was like, "What is this?" Like, and it just haunted me in a way that, you know, usually you're not like haunted by music, and this one just wouldn't leave. It wanted to be explored in so many different ways, um, and refused to become a composition, basically. And
Mm.
early, like, I think what I thought it was right at the beginning, because I was at the airport, was this thing about when you see the bags arriving on the carousel belt.
Uh-huh.
Um, some bags are small, some bags are big, some bags are blue, some bags are black, some have this kind of handle, some have this kind of wheel. And what if all of those were different kinds of similar but different phrases? Um, and so a little mini loop of a musical phrase, which is slightly different for the blue one, slightly different, larger for the bigger bag, slightly darker for the maroon bag.
Mm.
And I mean, the phrase arrived first, and then I thought of this because I think it would be too heady to try and like create music from the bags. Um, but then when this thing arrived, I realized what it was. It was like patchwork. Um,
Mm.
it's the patchwork of the life that we all are in. Like we're surrounded by diversity of all kinds of different things, whether it's bags, or whether it's the clothes we wear, or whether it's people. And we are all similar but slightly different. And so those musical phrases, um, like the shape of them was similar, but the exact notes within them might be slightly different. And so it was like there's something
Beautiful.
here compositionally that I haven't explored before. Um,
Oh.
and that led to that technique being used in a piece that I did in February, no, in March here in London, which was about sort of, yeah, kind of the feeling of being othered. Um, Sort of the whole project was called Borderlands, and it was about sort of people at borders and their experiences. And that technique was also used in the thing that you saw in Kolkata,
Mm-hmm.
which was called One Size Fits All, which was, and in that context, it became how the weavers of from rural Kolkata who have spent their whole life, creating other people's dupattas and saris and
Mm-hmm.
kurtas, this and that, the process of kantha making, for example, is patchwork, like layering pieces, smaller pieces. And actually, all those are discarded pieces from other saris, which I
Wow.
found. So there's this recycling thing that is inbuilt into that process.
Beautiful.
Um, and so this thing about like discarded phrases from like well, from whatever, can be cut and pasted together to create something new felt right.
That, I
Uh,
mean, that explores so many relevant themes, like the concept of being discarded, uh, being, a questionable one, especially since that which is being discarded is enough substance to actually make a beautiful work of art out of. You're kind of completely challenging the system with that, aren't you?
I mean, I think the system is really not helping any of us.
Mm-hmm.
Any, if it helped a few people before, sure, but it wasn't something that was a home to everybody. And
So true.
and now I feel like um, almost everything about the model of a professional musician should be challenged.
100%.
Um, because it's not serving people, it's not serving audiences, it's not serving artists, it's not serving students. Um, they they are walking blindly into something that they don't understand, I think. Um,
Clearly in the air. I just released a solocast episode yesterday called "The Myth of the Music Career."
hmm,
It's like addresses exactly this. Oh, I mean, I shouldn't presume that we're using the same lens, but it's so synchronistic that you mentioned that. But keep going. Tell us more. Why do you think this entire system of what a professional musician or artist, as established, is not serving anyone?
um, there's a huge gap, I think, between the the joy that someone feels, and joy is probably the right word, I think, um, that someone feels when they start playing something or they get into music. And there's a mind, body, soul um, chemistry that needs to work in a very specific kind of way for you to feel like, wow, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm getting better, and there's more to learn. And you're on this like beautiful wheel,
So true.
which really uplifts you. And I think anyone who's a music student who enjoys doing that will probably say the same thing, that there's a sense of like, if I practice, I get better. There's a sense of upliftment from inside, and surely that is spiritual or something.
100%.
Um, the gap between that and sort of having, nonstop tour dates, um, the machine of social media like working in your favor, people, you know, like flooding your account with comments and loves and heart emojis and stuff. Um, Between those states is a is an abyss that
Very well said.
um, is not shared. It's gate kept, if that's a thing,
That is a
by
thing.
the people who have made it, um, who are who know how horrible it is actually in there, but they will continue the illusion that it was incredible and
Hmm.
that other people should aspire to where they are. Um, and at that point in time, I don't know how easy it is to retain that sense of joy that you felt when you first started. Um,
So
because you're basically having to churn out a product because you promised that product, and you have created an appetite for that product, and there are people who will take money away from you if you don't deliver that product. And now your house is on the line, and you have bills to pay. And so, um, even though when you pick up your guitar or your violin or your sarod or whatever, and you found this new little melody that's really calling to you, and it's like, play me. You're like, well, no, I need to do the thing that, and this sense of journey and evolution, which is normal and natural and organic, has to be shelved, um, in order to become the this sort of model of success. Um, and I find that really troubling.
man, you take the words right out of my mouth, man. Those I've literally used identical phrases in so many other conversations I've had. It's very reassuring for me to find out that I'm not the only one who's been noticing that something's legit off with this. What's up with this abyss, in your opinion, with the kind of experience you bring, both from an artistic and industrial, for lack of a better term, experience? Why is this abyss so coveted?